two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa, the host today, and I'm here with Mac Carden. Mac is now a member of Syracuse DSA, but he used to be a member of Ithaca DSA. That's how we got to know each other, doing voter registration. So we're going to talk about voting systems, which Mac, as a math major formerly, now graduated, has more of a handle on than I do because I go a little nuts when it comes to numbers. 2 years ago, 2019, National DSA had massive controversies around the voting systems that we were using for our DSA national elections. There's a system called Borda that formerly had been used, but some people were talking about it as though it were a horrible, violent crime and demanding others. A lot of them were demanding what's called single transfer vote. Some of them were demanding systems with other names that I think we won't even go into because nobody seems to be talking about them this year. There is a resolution coming up at the National Convention, August of this year. If you're looking at the video later, it will know, it'll be in the past. And it calls for using single transfer vote in things like the election for National Political Committee of DSA, which is in essence the national board of the organization. In the past, I was pretty confused by a lot of this controversy and not really sure what it was about, but it hasn't ended entirely. So we are going to take it up. Mac Carden, what is the difference between single transfer vote and Borda?
First of all, off the top, we should say what they have in common, which is that they're both ranked choice voting systems. So that means that when you go to vote in an election, if it is a ranked choice voting system, instead of voting for one person, you rank the candidates from who you like most to who you like least. And the only difference between Borda and single transferable vote, actually, it's kind of a significant difference, but the difference is in how these votes get counted, right? So the top line difference, the most important difference, is that Borda is a consensus voting system. So that means that consensus candidates who a lot of people like, not a lot of people hate, the kind of candidates who are a lot of people's third or fourth or fifth place picks, but not a lot of people's first or last place picks. Those kinds of candidates do pretty well in Borda. And on the other hand, controversial candidates who are a lot of people's first place picks, but also a lot of people's last place picks, do pretty badly in Borda. Now, for single transferable vote, that's kind of flipped around. Controversial candidates who are a lot of people's first choice pick and a lot of people's last choice pick can do pretty well in single transferable vote elections, while consensus candidates who are a lot of people's third or fourth place pick and not a lot of people's first place pick are going to do pretty poorly in single transferable vote elections.
Would you say Borda favors the middle of the road people and single transfer vote kind of gets the edgier ones in.
Yeah, definitely. Like Borda is more like, yes, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Which may not be bad, because I also seem to recall old days of sometimes looking at this kind of rank your professors website. And I noticed that it seemed to me that actually very good professors would wind up with very polarized votes.
Yeah, I think it's certainly very situational, and it depends on, like which one you favor is maybe going to depend on how you view DSA, for internal DSA elections, right? Uh, if you think DSA has to change a lot very quickly, like if you think that DSA as an organization is really not where it needs to be, then maybe you want to lean towards single transferable vote, because that's going to result in these candidates who are very change heavy winning more often and having kind of this more diverse set of voices at the table who maybe have different views on how the organization should be ordered. Whereas with Borda, if you are maybe afraid of, for example, DSA becoming too factional, or maybe even, you're afraid of DSA splitting up along different factions, as socialist organizations sometimes have a habit of doing. Maybe you prefer Borda because you want slower change. You don't want quite as much divisiveness among our membership, and you want kind of more of these a focus on what we agree on than what we disagree on.
Okay. But actually, it doesn't always work that way, because when I think back on DSA elections, 2017, when I believe Borda was still being used, if I'm not mistaken, the National Political Committee turned out to be very argumentative and factionalized.
Mhm.
And 2019, when I am told they went to single transfer vote, STV as it's usually called, a much more consensual and cooperative NPC came out of that election. Now, there may have been many other factors involved, so you can't just say it's because of how the votes were counted. I have heard that it was STV in 2019. I was not actually a delegate. I didn't get to vote. I didn't get to experience it. But getting back to the topic at hand, so how does Borda work?
Like I said before, when you go to vote in a Borda system, you'll rank the candidates who you like from who you like most to who you like least. And the candidate who you rank the lowest will get 0 points from your vote. So they get nothing from it, right? And then the person you rank the second lowest will get 1 point. And the person you rank the third lowest will get 2 points. And it keeps going up like that, 1 point at a time. So say there are 21 candidates in the race. The person who you ranked second is going to get 19 points from your vote. And the person who you ranked first is going to get 20 points. So the reason why this is good for consensus candidates is because if you are, someone's third or fourth choice or fifth choice, that means that you're getting 15, 16, 17 points off their vote, as opposed to the first choice person who is getting 20 points off their vote. So there's actually not a huge difference between being someone's first choice pick and someone's fourth choice pick. So if you're a lot of people's third or fourth choice pick, you're doing pretty good in a Borda election. On the other hand, if you're a controversial candidate, and a lot of the time you're getting ranked as people's last or second to last choice pick, that means that while you are getting 0 or 1 points from those people's votes, the people who are getting ranked third or fourth are getting 15 or 16 points. It's a pretty big difference. So if you're a lot of people's last place pick because you're a controversial candidate, you're going to do pretty poorly in a Borda election. In theory, as you pointed out before, there are other contributing factors besides the electoral system. Yeah.
Okay, and then in contrast, how does single transfer vote work?
First off, before I say this, as a quick warning, single transferable voting is a little bit complicated. So if anyone gets lost in here, I would like to say that's okay, and keep your eye on the ball. That kind of headline thing I said before, right? But getting into it, single transfer vote. Let's say that it's an election where there are 5 seats open, right? So there's 20 candidates or something running, and there's 5 seats open. In order to win, each of these candidates would need to get 20% of the vote. So that's like 1/5 of the vote because there's 5 seats. So say that you go into your voting booth and you vote for Jonathan as your first place candidate, and you put Margaret for your second place candidate. And say Jonathan gets 40% of everyone's first choice picks. Jonathan has cleared the 20% threshold that he needed. So he has won a seat on the assembly. But he actually got twice as many votes as he needed to get onto the assembly. So half of each of those votes that was given to him is going to go to people's second place choice. So Margaret will get half of your vote because you put her as your second place choice. And then say like Margaret gets 20% and she gets exactly 20% and she gets on the committee. That's kind of where your vote stops. None of it would trickle down after that to your third or fourth place votes. So very often in a single transferable vote election, your kind of third, fourth, or fifth place candidate is actually going to not get anything from your vote. And so there's not that much difference as a candidate, there's not that much difference between being ranked third or fourth and being ranked last or second to last. So it's important that you're getting people's first or second place votes. So that's why these controversial candidates who, are getting a lot of first place votes, but also a lot of last place votes, do pretty well in a single transferable vote system.
I'm not sure that I followed it all. It does get challenging. And actually, I am thinking perhaps Borda was used in the past because back when people didn't have computers. I mean, my memory goes back to long, long ago. And I mean the late 1980s, I guess, when I didn't even run for NPC, but went to DSA national conventions and was put on the elections committee. And we were sitting up late at night and adding up columns of numbers by hand. And then Herb Shore, a wonderful physicist from San Diego, I guess in the early 90s, wrote some little program that enabled us to do the same thing by computer. There was still some sitting up to enter the numbers, but it wasn't as time consuming as.
Yeah, so certainly single transferable vote, because it's kind of complicated, that does get copied over into if you were doing it all by hand, it would end up being a lot of math, even more than Borda, which is already kind of a lot of math. So that was probably a consideration back when DSA was deciding its election system before computers were quite as accessible. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you have even a few more examples of how one or the other election system affects results. I think you were sort of giving one.
Yeah, sure.
But maybe examples are the best way to learn, I think.
Yeah. So what we could do is walk through an example of, something that could happen in an election, and then see in a ranked choice voting election, and then see how the results will be different, whether you're counting the votes in a Borda system or a single transferable vote system. Okay. So let's say a person, Theresa, let's say you, are running for some committee, and there are 5 seats open. And let's go with that. There are 21 candidates running again. Number 21 is not important. It makes the numbers nice, though. And let's say that 1,000 people are voting. And let's suppose, Theresa, that you're in this situation, you're a very controversial candidate. And we'll say, like, out of the 1,000 people voting, 20% of them, so that's 200 people, put you as their first choice pick. They really love you, but all of the other 80% are going to put you as their last choice pick. So in a single transferable vote system, you got 20% of the first choice picks. So you've cleared the threshold you needed. You're in. You've won your seat. On the other hand, in a Borda system, each of those people who put you as their first choice pick, that each of them translate into you winning 20 points, whereas you get 0 points from each of the people who ranked you last. So since 200 people ranked you first, you're going to get 4,000 points, which sounds pretty good, but it's actually pretty bad because in this situation, we're talking about a total of some 110,000 points. So you're getting less than 4% of the points, right? So this shows kind of, obviously it's an exaggerated example, but it kind of shows how dramatic the difference could be, where a really controversial candidate could walk out of the same election and get, win a seat in a single transferable vote counting of that election, but only get 4% of the points in a board account of the election and do pretty badly.
Well, there recently was a New York City mayoral election in which I think they were using single transferable vote. And actually, I got the sense that a fairly middle of the road candidate won. Although I'm not sure. I know he's controversial, but I think all the candidates were controversial, or at least that's all I was hearing. Nothing but controversy.
Yeah, I got the impression it didn't seem like any of the candidates were super well liked, I guess, or by everyone, certainly. So I guess this is a little bit of a different situation from internal DSA elections because they were all running just for one seat.
Yeah.
So that does change the math a little bit. The like so I'm not sure that the controversial candidates doing well versus the consensus candidates doing poorly dynamic still really works when it's just one candidate. But it is in fact, it might not even be called single transferable vote when it's just one candidate. I think there's another.
It's just ranked choice voting.
Yeah, or there might be another name for. I should have looked this up before the interview, but I think it might have a different name when it's just one seat that the candidates are running for. Yeah.
Okay. Well, another question, by the way, is looking at, again, internally at DSA. There's the only voting system that gets mentioned in DSA's now basically 40-year-old constitution is something called the hair system. It never seems to be used because its position is that it's optional, and a certain percent of the electorate has to request it before it gets used. And I have never seen it be requested, and I have a feeling hardly anybody even remembers what it is. And certainly they don't get their acts together to request it. It's not that I've seen it requested, but the request failed. It's that I just haven't seen anybody ask for it. But there it sits, HARE system, HARE, like the rabbit. Can you say anything about what that is?
Sure, yeah. So the HARE system it's another ranked choice voting scheme. And the way that it works would be that you have your candidates, and they each get a certain percentage of the vote, right, from people's first place picks. And then when you have, and then the person who gets the least number of first place picks is removed from the running. And all the people who voted for them, their votes go to those people's second choice picks. And you repeat that, removing the lowest voted for person and redistributing those votes until the number of people left matches the number of seats that you're trying to fill. I would guess also another reason why it doesn't get used very often is, my understanding is that this is for the clause in the Constitution that says you can request this form of voting is for the delegates that local chapters send to the National Convention. And I think that most local chapters, I know this was the case in Syracuse this year and Ithaca, that there probably aren't super competitive elections for those seats unless you're in kind of a big city chapter where there's a lot more people who might be interested in filling those positions. I don't know if that's different outside of a year where the convention's happening on the computer or not. Maybe you could shed some light on that.
I don't quite know. One thing about DSA is that it has been growing phenomenally since about 2016, especially since 2016, actually since 2015. The growth started before 2016, but it became really fast, like Trump was elected and people apparently just sort of said, we got to do something about this. And I think at that moment, some celebrity said, well, one thing you can do is join DSA. And there was this enormous, I'm told even election night, people were just starting to join. And this has happened several times. There have been several such moments since. One was when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected to the House of Representatives in New York City. That was another triumph, sort of DSA seen as a DSA triumph, and people just, hey, this is the place to be, and joined. And there have been a few smaller, but significant moments since then. The result is that it's actually been a very fast changing organization, and it's very hard to compare 1 year to the next, or 1-2 year period to the next. Moreover, of course, COVID hit and everything went online, and that also changed a lot of dynamics. And I don't think we really know it. I think the best thing you can say is past performance does not predict future results. And technologies are changing too, as I mentioned. Remembering some of those long ago technologies. Sometimes they don't keep up. New York City, it took like 2 weeks before they came to any results. Now, all New York elections are a little bit slow because in the New York system, you don't, I mean, you get an election night count, initial election night count, but you don't really get ballots. Mail-in ballots are allowed to arrive for about a week after the election. And so you can't have a strictly official count start until a week after the election. Now, when it's a very simple election, you can have initial results that work well, because you will, I mean, simplest case, if you see that candidate A has a margin of victory that is larger than the number of votes, than the number of absentee ballots that could possibly come in, then you aren't going to have any surprises. But there have been a couple of elections within memory when the results change, right here in Tompkins County, where the results changed between election night and once the mail-in ballots were there. In fact, I was a candidate in one such election back in 1995.
I didn't know you had run for office.
I ran for common council in 1995, was like, I forget, 1 or 2 votes ahead on election night, and thank goodness had the presence of mind when the press came up to me to say, it's too close to call. And indeed, in the final count, I lost by 2 votes.
Ooh, that's hard. I suppose while we're on the,
Yeah, I was going to say, Mac Carden, our time is up.
Okay.
So thank you very much. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm here with Mac Carden. We've been talking about voting systems. I'm Theresa Alt. Thank you for watching.